Young people often do not want to look after their elderly parents, preferring to hand over those who gave them life and raised them to a nursing home. In this case, strangers take care of the elderly, preparing food for them and listening to their stories. At the same time, their children live their own lives and very rarely remember their parents who gave them life, who didn't sleep at night when they were sick, who spent all their time caring for them. Animals sometimes show more loyalty to their masters than do their own children. Even wild animals are able to remember the kindness shown to them. They will not abandon those who took care of them. Today's story is about such an animal. The man in our story has seen a lot in his life. When he was young, he was so tired of the hustle and bustle of the city that he decided to move to a remote taiga village where he would spend the rest of his life enjoying the fresh air and silence of the forest. The village was sparsely populated. There were only a few residential buildings, and only elderly people lived there. The neighbors were friendly and helped each other as much as they could. The man learned to shoot well in his youth, so he turned out to be a very skillful hunter, and every time he returned from the forest with dinner. Life in the village made him very happy. He was constantly busy and did not think about his problems. One winter, as usual, he was sitting at home with a cup of tea when suddenly he heard shots. Most likely it was his neighbors who were hunting in the forest, so he did not pay much attention to it. But soon the shots were repeated, and not far from his house, he heard a wolf howl. The man put on his jacket, hat, and boots and went out onto the porch. He was bewildered to see at his gate the body of a she-wolf. She was in the cold snow, showing no signs of life, and a red trail followed her from the road. Apparently, she received fatal wounds by hunters. The man made sure she was no threat, but he was surprised to see under her body was a live wolf pup. He was so small that he could barely move independently, and his eyes were still closed. He whimpered pitifully, nuzzled his mother's body, and tried to wake her up. He was so small and helpless that the man took pity on him and took him in his arms. The baby was shivering all over with cold and fear, and when he was in the warm hands of the man, he stopped whimpering. By this time, the hunters had run up to the man's house. They said that while hunting in the forest, they came across a she-wolf with her pup who attacked people in order to protect him. They managed to shoot her several times, but she grabbed her pup and rushed towards the village. That is how she ended up at the doorstep of the man's house. When the neighboring hunters saw the lifeless body of the wolf, they calmed down, but then asked about the fate of the baby. They did not find him near his mother and thought that she had dropped him somewhere on their way. Then the man revealed the tiny animal, determined to keep him at his house. Everyone indicated that it would be impossible to keep a wild animal in his house, but he replied that he would take full responsibility. The neighbors, of course, were not happy with this decision. No one wanted to live next door to a wild beast, but the man was adamant. The man spent the next few weeks with little sleep. He made a special bottle for feeding his pet, fed him every few hours, forgetting about his own comfort and health. He soothed him when he whimpered at night, looked after him, and protected him. When the pup grew, he started taking him to the forest to hunt with him. The wolf happily ran around his master, but did not run far and always returned home with the man. A couple of years passed like this. The wolf grew up. Outwardly, he looked very impressive and even scary, but his habits barely differed from an ordinary dog. The man taught him many commands, and all the neighbors were impressed. During this time, he never showed aggression either towards people or other animals. The man fed him plenty of meat, which he hunted for, and the wolf grew noticeably stronger. But the health of the man during this time became worse. It was getting harder and harder for him to cope with the household and get out into the forest to hunt. In addition, the elderly man very often began to forget basic things and often misplaced things. Over time, the man almost completely stopped leaving his home. It was difficult for him to walk, and he moved only within the courtyard of his house. The man's food on the table also became scarce, and in the end, he switched only to simple food, bread, tea, and some vegetables. There was not much to feed the wolf either, as there was no meat. But the wolf, as if understanding his condition, gladly devoured any food offered to him, while still not leaving for the forest, but staying to live next to his master. One evening, the elderly man and the wolf, as usual, shared the last of a loaf of bread, drank some water, and went to bed. But the man, having lit the stove for the night, forgot to open the damper before going to sleep. The wolf, as usual, settled down beside the man's bed, and they both fell asleep. The elderly man woke up to his wolf rushing around the room, whimpering desperately, and the smell of smoke in the air. Within seconds, he saw the fire. He tried to get out of bed, but his legs would not obey. Then he raised himself up on his elbows, slowly trying to get down from the bed and crawl to the door, but he did not have enough strength and he fell to the floor. The man severely injured his shoulder during the fall and now could not move at all due to the terrible pain that instantly spread through his entire body. Then the wolf, realizing that the man could not get out on his own, grabbed the corner of the blanket in which the elderly man was wrapped with his teeth and started pulling him with all his might towards the exit. The man helped the wolf as best he could, but his legs would not obey, and his shoulder ached so much that he could not even help himself with his hands. After numerous attempts to move, the man lost consciousness, having inhaled too much carbon monoxide. He woke up after some time in the house of his neighbors. He could not remember what happened and how he got there. Then the neighbors told him that when they ran to the fire, his house was already engulfed in flames, but his faithful friend was still able to pull him out of the burning house and drag him away on the blanket to a safe distance. People quickly lifted the elderly man off the ground and took him to their house in order to provide him with the necessary care. The man could not believe his ears. He was very worried about his pet, but the neighbors said that all this time the wolf was faithfully waiting for his owner to wake up. They opened the door and let the beast come to the man. The elderly man had tears in his eyes from what he saw. All of the wolf's skin was scorched by fire, and there were large wounds on his head. The wolf sat next to the man, looked into his eyes, and it was clear that he was glad the man survived. So, risking his life, his health, the wolf did not hesitate for a second. He helped the elderly man get out of the burning house, thereby saving his life, just like the man himself once took pity on the wild wolf and did not let those hunters kill him, but took him into his own house, fed him, and took care of him all these years. The wolf repaid in full for his salvation that day. He, despite his own wounds which he got from the fire, carried the unconscious man out into the street and saved him from certain death. Write in the comments what you think about this story. If there are any stories of true devotion in your life, share them with us. And if you liked this story, click like and subscribe to the channel if you have not subscribed yet, so as not to miss our new incredible stories from the lives of ordinary people.